Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I am very excited to share our guest with you. But before I do, there are some people I want to thank that we always thank. We want to thank brassandwinds.com, a Quinn the Eskimo company. When we at Willow Music are looking to teach brass and wind instruments and we need some to order for our clients, we always go to Brass and Winds first. They're a fabulous company. They'll take good care of you. Please visit brassandwinds.com. You're watching Truer MU, The Truth About Music, where we try to go a little bit deeper than the other music stations about music. We try to talk to people who have a sort of an insight, maybe that goes a little deeper than the norm. And you're also able, if you look at our playlist, to take lessons or to find some other interesting things here. Please check us out at youtube.com, TruerMU. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest to you. There are several people out in the world that I've been fortunate to find over the years that are kindred spirits with me. And if I find them, I find myself incredibly fortunate, and I try to hang on as much as I can. Mr. Jason Lyon is one of those people who I found, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago by accident through some mention in a jazz blog. And once I connected with him, I just couldn't believe my luck. It was really interesting talking to him about so many things. And finally, my dream has come true, and I get to introduce him to you, unless you know him already. Pianist and educator Jason Lyon has been performing, composing, and arranging, teaching, and writing for over 30 years. His experience as a player, composer, ranges from classical, Latin, jazz, funk, pop, you name it. He keeps a blog at jasonlyonjazz.wordpress.com, where you can hear his new album, Recollections. Jason Lyon, welcome to our show.
Hello, Adam.
It's just great to have you here. How's it going?
Yes, we're all still doing okay here. We're still breathing.
Yeah, and to be clear, the folks don't know, I suppose, because I didn't tell them, you're located in London, swinging London.
Yes, yeah. I don't know how much it swings. I think it rocks more nowadays than it swings. But yeah.
Well, if it's doing any kind of movement at all, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So you have a vast knowledge of music in all sorts of directions, and yet the truth is that is not your day job, which is a kind of a very interesting thing. What's your day job?
Well, okay. My day job for years has been journalist, and I'll tell you a story about that. I was on a gig once, and this guy came up in the break and said, "Oh, great, loved it." And I was talking to some other punters, and the conversation was all about the European bond market, and this guy was like, "So what do you know all this stuff?" Yeah, I told you I was a journalist. Yeah, but don't you write about music? Well, yeah, I do, but also, and it was funny. It was like a light went out in this guy's eyes. I'd gone from this cool guy on stage playing piano to this gray suit in an instant. And I think that's funny. I think musicians can often, they fall into the trap of music just being their entire life, and that isn't the case. Really, the best musicians I've ever worked with, there are other things as well. So I think maybe it goes into this notion that perhaps you have to devote every waking breath to music in order to be a musician, a proper musician. And that's not true. So, okay, well, another anecdote, since I'm pontificating. Like many people, I suppose a lot of us learned, I'm sure you did as well as I did, by, you'd buttonhole the bands on gigs. You go up to them in the breaks and you'd, "Oh, yeah, can I come and hang out with you guys?" and that kind of stuff. And you go, "Oh, yeah, great." And you think, and you sit there and you go, "Cool, I'm with the guys." And then, they don't spend their breaks talking about, "Ooh, that tritone substitution, the way you quoted, Train or Common Hawkins on that chorus. And, oh, yeah, the way you did that little lick." They're talking about the kids. They're talking about the football results last night. They're talking about the mortgage. It's music to me, ultimately, I think, is a way of telling stories. I know there are a lot of ways of approaching music, but ultimately, I think it's about telling stories. And I think you can, if you're not careful, fall into the trap of being a very good storyteller without stories to tell, really, apart from how to tell stories.
Do you think this is somewhat what happens to some people who do devote their entire lives to music, and then as they get older, there's just not the same appeal anymore? Somebody like, well, I don't want to name names. That would be pretty
No,
rude,
no,
I
no.
think, in this point. But I'm thinking, just there's a number, for instance, of pop stars who are just, they were just unbelievably appealing in their 20s. And by the time they were in their 40s and had been doing nothing but music, uh, it seems like perhaps they didn't have as many stories to tell. Not all of them, but some of them. Is this, do you think, the reason?
I don't know. I mean, no, I mean, I couldn't. No, I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. I think it varies for all of us. But if your entire life is the instrument, your studio, the making of it, the marketing of it, then I don't think you're really doing it right. That's at least my opinion.
Yeah. Well, what about the idea that you really do have to commit to a certain level to produce anything worthwhile? What does that commitment mean if it's not going in all the way?
I don't think you see. Okay, let me just get a bit broader on this. I think we're sort of stuck in this kind of mindset that you've got to be a totally dedicated in order to be good, um, or competent, or whatever you want to say. Um, oh, it's not true. It's just not true. I mean, Charles Ives sold insurance.
Yeah.
McCoy Tyner drove a cab for a while. You can't just sort of pigeonhole people that way. I don't really see it in those terms.
Well, hold on now. McCoy Tyner didn't want to drive a cab, did he?
He was quite happy. Okay, to give you a British example,
All right.
Stan Tracy. Have you heard of him, the pianist?
No, I haven't.
Oh, check him out. I mean, he's most famous for that he did an album called Under Milkwood,
Oh,
but he was also one of these. He was the part of the house band at Ronnie Scott's when the embargo broke between the US and the UK, and they eventually we could start shipping over these legendary guys, and he was the house pianist for that, and he played for years and years at the old Ronnie Scott's place. And then after that, he just sort of whatever. Well, there are other circumstances involved, but he said, "What the hell?" And he was quite happy. He disappeared for about 10 years and became a postman,
huh.
and he was perfectly happy doing that.
That sounds like it shouldn't be allowed, but yeah,
Hmm.
right. That's nice. Well, now when you were
Well,
young,
what's wrong with postman anyway?
what's wrong? Nothing at all. Nothing at all. I mean, no,
The mail always gets through.
it's a great example. And there's lots of time on the job to think about music.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So when you were young, you took a lot of music. You studied piano and violin and the clarinet. You didn't end up getting a certificate later on. You didn't end up, making music your major in your upper grades. But when you were younger, did you have a sense that how did music start for you? I mean, you seem to be consumed by music. So was that consumption always there, or has it grown over time?
I don't think I was totally consumed by music, but it was always very important to me. Um, I should clarify. I think I know you're speaking in the American tradition of taking and majoring and things like that. Um, I mean, we're about the same age, Adam. I'm born in '68. When in the UK, if you're interested in music, you you maybe had piano lessons, maybe at school or maybe with a private teacher or something, and it was classical, and you did grades, what we call grades. I'm sure you're aware of that
Mhm.
concept. Um, and so you do that, and then maybe you go to a more musically inclined but not completely inclined school, which I suppose would be equivalent of high school in your terms. And in my case, that meant, it was the kind of place where if you didn't play three instruments, you were thick. But that isn't the reason why I was actually interested in that. I liked the violin, so I learned it, and I liked the clarinet, so I learned it. Both of them actually put me in very good stead for later on in terms of writing and arranging. But I couldn't. I mean, if you put a gun to my head nowadays, I couldn't really get much of a note out of either of them. But I had the physical experience of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I'm digressing, so
No, not at all, not at all.
I'll pull. Yeah, go on. I'll pull back onto the point. No, I didn't go the traditional route. I was not going to be a music conservatoire or music major or music college kind of person. It was sort of around that time, particularly if you're interested in jazz. If you like jazz, maybe you had an understanding teacher and they might just have enough about them to say, oh, here's a book of Scott Joplin rags, learn them. You couldn't even get the recordings, really. There was certainly, I mean, we didn't have the Ebersolds, we didn't have the real books or anything like that for many years, probably until about the 80s, or they were bootleg. So you kind of had to figure it out. Again, another digression. But no, I was never going to be a music school kind of person.
No, that surprises me to hear you say that because of how you ended up. The level of musicianship that you have at this point would suggest that you certainly could have been. Did you make an active decision not to be that person, or did you just think you weren't?
I'd say it was a passive decision rather than an active one. Music was always something I was very interested in, but it wasn't what I did.
Yeah.
Just everything I did. But I continued to play, and even when I dropped education, there is a point where you can reach with if you've been through the grades or a certain level of understanding on any instrument, and you've got some theory going, you can become your own teacher, and you can keep that running in parallel as your life goes, and that's pretty much the way I did. And then you get into bands, and it sort of progresses from there. But perhaps you do miss out. I'm sorry, I'm probably acting as a bit of an anti-advert for Willow here. You do actually, you can wind up missing out because you don't get the network of people that you meet as you come up with and learn with, and people you play with and rehearse with and scuffle little gigs with that you would if you were in a dedicated music teaching environment.
Well, are you truly an autodidact, or did you have a good jazz teacher?
I had a couple of jazz teachers. Yeah, pretty good. You probably wouldn't recognize any of the names. There's nothing stellar. But they were occasional and transitionary. And most of my jazz teachers were people I played with and said, "Hey, have you tried this?" Or people I buttonholed on gigs, as I said earlier on, and said, "Oh, well, this is the way you get that sound. You want this cool sound on, like a dominant chord. Hey, here's an upper. This is called an upper structure." And I was, "Oh, yeah, okay," that kind of thing. So I had to put it together piecemeal. No, I didn't have an abiding professorial or mentorial presence really in music, which does also put a bit of a burden on you, I think, because you haven't really got anyone to refer to, and you really have to learn to be your own judge of yourself, which is a very difficult skill and takes years.
I hope this question isn't too personal, but you could have found you someone. Why didn't you?
I was busy getting on with life, doing. I had other jobs. I discovered girls and cigarettes, and and stuff like that. And and sorry to be. I hope I don't seem so sort of anti-music ed here. I had a job that paid me quite well, and it was great. So
Talk about that job. What was the job?
Well, journalism. I'm started off as a sub editor back in the days when you worked on print, or well, it was computer for print. You edited the copy, you rewrote the copy. You were generally supposed to be actually. It was when the tradition was still was the old-fashioned way that the reporters were the guys that went out there, and guys and girls who went out there and with the note. You gave them a travel allowance and sent them out there with a notebook to get the details. And it was actually really the editorial staff that wrote the thing. This notion that reporters and columnists and things are the real people and sub-editors just, make it fit and correct the spelling mistakes and so on is a very modern thing. So yeah, no, I mean that was a good living, particularly at the time in this culture. Just before in the UK, there were a lot of openings in the UK for people, particularly on the freelance side. Come in, do this, do this, do this, do this. We need this stuff. We need it to fit that page. We need this rewriting. We need that done in a certain way.
It's interesting that it sounds a little like comping.
Very much so, yes. Actually, there are a lot of comparisons.
And let me make sure the audience knows what I'm talking about. The comping is
Please.
what happens in the background. Usually a pianist or a guitarist is filling in the space that the soloist is leaving out to try to create a good support or a lusher sound, or perhaps some alternate. It's basically a support role for a rhythm instrument. And I'm suggesting to Jason that his role as a support to a reporter or a writer, there may have been some bleed through there.
Yeah, I'd go a little further with comping, but it depends on the kind of personality you have, and personalities involved, and the relationship you have between each other. I can say comping can actually sometimes be a bit more daring than that, and sometimes you're leading as much as you're following.
Yeah. Well, it is definitely a conversation. I would think. So let's talk. You are playing music while you have this job. You're doing jam sessions. I think you may have a good story or two from your first jam session.
Several hundreds. From generally, but from the first one. Yeah, I do have one from my first one. First jam session I was absolutely nervous as a kid. And it was just a local bar I went to, and the manageress said, her name is Elvira, by the way. And I'm sorry to disappoint schlock sci-fi fans, but there's a track on the album called Blues for Elvira, and it's got nothing to do with this kind of vampire business thing. It's actually a not uncommon Spanish name, and it's dedicated to her because she was Spanish, but she had a real penchant for gutsy blues. So I wrote that one for her. That's a little diversion. Anyway, yeah, just said, hey, yeah, you guys, you play some. Why don't you get some guys together? So I found some people, and I was nervous as a kitten first time out, and I was like, hey, I think I maybe knew about 8 tunes, and I don't know to this day. After the first tune, it all went down well. People seemed to enjoy it. After the first number, one of the waitresses came up and stuck a large brandy on the piano, and they never told me who it was from, and I never got the message as to whether it was well done or chill out. I to this day I don't know.
That's
but yeah, I mean, I've got a million jams. Everyone's got a million jam session stories,
Well, you recently, it's been a while since you did Brasserie, but that's your most recent jam session. Would you compare the experience of your most recent jam session to that initial jam session?
Okay, I'm going to answer that in a slightly different way. I think being a musician is, well, at least for me, is about first you learn to play your instrument, then you learn to play the band, and then you learn to play the room. And then, of course, perhaps after that, you learn to play the venue and the media and the world and what have you. I think that's why a lot of musicians tend to wind up, some musicians tend to wind up being band leaders, because you're not playing your instrument, you're playing the band. Mm-hmm. And I think the more jam sessions you do, the more you get used to it's everything. It's handling the personalities, it's putting people at their ease, it's putting them in the right situation, in the right combinations, often on the fly, that kind of thing. It's about getting people together to do the right thing at the right time in the most conducive situation. And that's band leading to me. So I would say, yeah, when I started, I was, oh my God, I hope I don't mess up. And I've got this guy playing bass and this guy playing drums. And hopefully, since it's a jam session, I hope within the next half hour, at least one of my friends turns up with a saxophone or something. Because otherwise I'll run out of tunes. But, I mean, after many years of doing it with the, I mean, the last one I did, which is actually over 5 years ago, yeah, you find yourself half the time being conductor. In fact, a lot of the time I found myself off the stage, put someone in, you've got a guitarist, don't need a pianist. Somebody wants to play the piano, put another one on. It's not, you don't have to be the guy playing all the time, and and you're scooting around and sorting people out. That's the way I approach it.
Mm-hmm. It sounds, again, I hope you don't mind my making the analogy, but it's almost like human editing.
Yeah, and journalism, I mean, it's cat herding, basically.
Yeah, right. So
um,
you left out one thing. You told, you made a quote, 20 years, it took me 20 years to become a jazz musician, 10 years learning how to play, 10 years learning how not to play. So as you're learning to play the band and then the room and then the venue, when are you learning not to play?
That is about confidence, in my opinion. I mean, it's one way to get at it. When you start, I've been through my burning phase. I've been through my, wow, look at all these notes phase. Look at me, all these pentatonics, and got my hands, you can't see them. And then I think you need to develop the confidence to get to the stage where you, hey, you don't feel you have to play all the time, but you feel what you play is right. Yeah. And if what is right is something simple, you play something simple. If what is right is not playing at all, you don't play at all. And I think that is part of the, referring to the sentiment you mentioned with that quote I gave on the website. Yeah. 20 years, you learn all the notes and the chords and the scales and the licks and the runs and go out there. And then thereafter, you just think, yeah, okay, well, no, it's linked in with this idea of playing the band in a way. If it doesn't need it, don't play it. But I mean, yeah, say?
It takes courage.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely, it does, especially since there are an awful lot in the audience and actually quite a lot of venue owners who won't actually think you're a very good musician because you're not playing very much. Yeah, no, it's what I'm not playing that's important. This, any idiot can go, well, some great people can do that. So, I mean, I'm just generalizing, but yeah, and that is a concern. You get to the stage where you think, oh, yeah, I've got to impress people. And then there's another way of impressing people, which is not showing off, doing the music right. Yeah. If that sounds a bit trite, maybe, but
I don't think so. Doing the music right, it's just hard to define. But I agree.
At least to me.
Yeah. Well, and it also, I guess I should say that this idea of a venue owner sitting in the audience, if they expect you to play more, well, then you're back to playing the venue. And if that's necessary, then that's what you do.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, I get this all the time at the play the venue. I mean, if they, you get this all the time. And people will take, a Valentine's Day gig and they won't play any of the usual tunes, or they'll take a Christmas gig and they'll do, yeah, let's rock out. No, people want certain things. You do actually have to play to the venue, which is both the owners and the audience. You've got to do it. But yeah, playing the band, that's the important thing for me.
How do you think about all these what appear to be extra musical things and still maintain a sense that you're actually making music and you can be satisfied with it?
I wouldn't say what I'm thinking about are extra musical. It's communication, isn't it?
Hmm.
And isn't music just communication?
Well, is it? I don't know. Is that
Well,
all music is?
it's communication via a certain medium. So you have to learn how to command that medium to a certain degree and use it in a certain way. But I do think that understanding the nature of the communication of the side, communication side of what you do is as important as the technical side.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is then if you are intent on communicating and you find you're in a situation where what you want to communicate is not being received, that can be very frustrating.
Yeah. But I mean, when you talk to somebody and they're not getting the point, what do? You change the way you're talking.
Hmm.
Sure.
So that's the answer then.
Well, no, I'm not saying that is the answer. It's just the way that I tend to approach things. None of this is proscriptive.
Gotcha. No, but I'm asking, for you to speak in a sort of prescriptive way, just because you speak from a certain amount of experience. And of course, there's other perspectives on this, and we touch on them in some of the other interviews we do. But it's valuable because you do have a unique experience, having spent so much time as a jam session leader. You do see a lot of different situations and people come by, and you have to deal with a lot of you have to deal with a lot of nonsense, in fact.
Oh, yeah. I've stopped fights. I've started fights. I've told people to get off the stage. I've told people to get on the stage. I've put deliberately, if somebody keeps coming back with the same, oh, let's do Cantaloupe Island again. I say, okay, but we pick the key. Yeah, I've done all that kind of stuff. It's like, what, you can't play it in A flat. All right, and get off. It's, oh, well, I don't want to play with him. I don't want to play with her. Or, no, I've just broken up with them. So no, we're not, no. Oh, well, I don't like the drummer. Oh, I don't care. But I mean, I've always done it, actually, in terms of running a jam session in a sort of generalized improvisatory way. And some people have lists that you sign up and you put your name and the tunes. I just generally tend to do it by feel and people and walking around and talking to people. That's another good thing about, if you get a jam session up to a stage where you can say, okay, get a guitarist or another pianist, I can hop off the stage, talk to people and see what mood they're in. The people I know, the people I don't, get to know them, put them at ease. And sometimes actually you wind up you wind up conducting, if you've got maybe 2 or 3 horns on a jam session, you can sort of sing little backing riffs, da 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 kind of stuff to one of the horn players, and then you can kind of conduct them, and it will work in that context, So it's. Oh, well, I don't know. I think I've probably said enough. I'm sure you get me. Yeah.
I do. It sounds like you have a lot of confidence in your ability to read people. And I'm wondering if, of course, you get a lot of experience doing that in these sessions. Have you always been able to read people well, or is that something that you just had to get good at?
I don't think I read people well. I just try.
Mm.
And a lot of people don't. No, I think anyone who says they read people well are setting themselves up for a fall. No, I mean, it's the same thing as, if you bump into somebody in a bar and say, and just, hey, hi, you don't, you're not trying to read them. You're just getting on with them. So I regard it on that level, I think.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's a wonderful way of kind of getting out of the power aspect of leading the session and getting more into a relationship, if I can use that word that way.
Well, I mean, my earliest sense, actually, one of the earliest sessions I ran, it was great because I'd play, a couple of tunes that I really liked with the people I chose. And then I'd go and sit in the bar and drink and watch somebody else do my job while I got paid. Hey, great. Yeah. And they were enjoying it. And I was getting paid. And it was going great. And if I wanted to get up and play, I could. I mean, that's what's not to like about that, right?